If you're like most drivers, you probably had this experience. You see another driver do something really stupid or dangerous and think, that driver's got to be on the phone or maybe drunk. You may have even contacted law enforcement in an effort to get a driver off the road. And when you consider that at any given time, approximately 12% of drivers on the road have alcohol or drugs in their system, your assumption may not be too far off. Fortunately, among professional drivers in our industry, the percentage is much, much lower. Still, tragically, over 10,000 people die on the highways as a result of drunk driving crashes every year. Add in the crashes and fatalities that result from drivers impaired by drugs, and you understand the seriousness of the problem. You can also see why the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA, has placed so much emphasis on required alcohol and drug testing. It's a fact. The FMCSA considers the issue of alcohol abuse and drug use so important that one of the 7 basics under CSA is specifically devoted to alcohol and drugs. In order to help prevent alcohol and drug-related crashes, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations mandate alcohol and drug testing for drivers of vehicles that require a commercial driver's license, a CDL. Under Part 382, the regulations spell out the types of testing required, confidentiality of the results, and the consequences for drivers who fail an alcohol test or test positive for drugs. One of the key terms in Part 382 is the definition of safety-sensitive function, because the alcohol and drug regulations apply to any driver who's performing or may be called upon to perform safety-sensitive functions. What qualifies as a safety-sensitive function? Obviously, driving is a safety-sensitive function, but so is loading and unloading, supervising others who are loading or unloading, inspecting your vehicle, even waiting for assistance with a disabled vehicle. In this program, we'll focus specifically on what you need to know when it comes to alcohol and drug testing under the regulations. Next, we'll talk about required testing. A number of tests are required by the regulations. Pre-employment, post-accident, random, reasonable suspicion, return to duty, and follow-up. We'll also discuss the procedures you can expect for both alcohol and drug tests and the consequences of failing an alcohol test, testing positive for drugs, or refusing to be tested. Finally, we'll touch on the confidentiality of alcohol and drug testing records and the role of substance abuse professionals, or SAPs, in helping drivers return to duty after a failed or positive test result. If you drive a commercial motor vehicle that requires a CDL, you know about pre-employment testing. All drivers, prior to performing safety-sensitive functions for a motor carrier for the first time, must be tested for drug use and have a negative test result. Pre-employment testing applies to both newly hired drivers as well as a person who transfers into a driving position from a non-driving position. And while the regulations don't specifically require it, hiring motor carriers may choose to include alcohol testing as part of their pre-employment process if certain criteria are met. Post-accident alcohol and drug testing is required if the accident resulted in one of the following. Any person involved in the accident dies. The accident involved injury requiring immediate medical treatment away from the scene and you were cited for a moving violation. Or the accident resulted in the towing of one or more vehicles from the scene and you were cited for a moving violation. Post-accident alcohol testing is required as soon as possible when these conditions are met and when the citation is issued within 8 hours of the accident. Under the regs, this test must be initiated within 2 hours of the accident, but no later than 8 hours after the accident. Post-accident drug testing is required as soon as possible when these conditions are met and when the citation is issued within 32 hours of the accident. Under the rules, this test must be administered within 32 hours following the accident. Under Part 382, employers are required to send a percentage of their drivers for random testing each year. Random testing for alcohol must be completed just before, during, or immediately after you perform a safety-sensitive function. Random testing for drugs can be done anytime you're at work for your employer. Once you're notified that you've been selected for testing, you must immediately proceed to the testing site. The method of selecting drivers for random testing must be just that, random. The regs go into detail on how the selection must be done. The tests must be reasonably spaced throughout the year, and each driver must have an equal chance of being tested each time the selections are made. In other words, there's a chance that some drivers may be selected more often than others. It's kind of like jury duty. Being selected once is no guarantee that you won't be called on again. One other point about random testing. There are some motor carriers that have too few drivers for random selection to be meaningful. If you drive for one of these companies, you may be put in a pool with other small firms to create a group large enough for true random selection. Such a group is referred to as a consortium. Also, if you're the only driver for your motor carrier, for example, you own and operate your own vehicle under your own authority, you must be part of a consortium. Remember, the whole purpose of Part 382 of the safety regs is to keep drivers who are impaired by alcohol or drugs off the road. So it only makes sense that there's a method for motor carriers to order testing when they suspect that a driver may be impaired. This is referred to as reasonable suspicion testing. The rules addressing reasonable suspicion testing are designed to balance the driver's rights with the important goal of safety on the highways. A motor carrier cannot arbitrarily send a driver for testing. A trained supervisor for the motor carrier must observe and document a specific set of behaviors that are spelled out in the regulations before testing can be ordered. Observations for alcohol testing must be made just before, during, or just after you perform a safety-sensitive function. Observations for drug testing may be made at any time you're at work for your motor carrier. Return to duty and follow-up testing occur after a driver has failed an alcohol test or tested positive for drugs, and after the driver has participated in an education and/or treatment process under the guidance of a substance abuse professional, an SAP. We'll talk more about the role of the SAP later on. For now, it's important to know that successful return to duty and follow-up tests are part of the process you must follow in order to return to performing safety-sensitive functions, including driving a commercial motor vehicle. We've talked about the types of tests that are required and when a driver is required to be tested. Now we'll review what you can expect when you go to the testing facility. First, alcohol testing. The alcohol test must be administered by someone who is trained and qualified in the procedures and on the device that will be used for your test. This person is usually referred to as a BAT, a breath alcohol technician, or an STT, a screening test technician.
Hello, I'm Cindy. I'll be administering your breath alcohol screening test today. Do you have your ID with you? May I please see your ID so I can confirm your identification for the test?
Sure. Here's my driver's license.
Thank you. The back of the form explains the procedure for taking the test. After you've read through it, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them for you. I've already filled out the first part of the form, but I'd like you to review it for accuracy and then fill out part 2. And then please sign where it indicates your agreement to take the test.
If you refuse to complete or sign the form, that is considered refusal to take the test and has the same consequences as failing the test.
This is the device we'll be using today. It's called an evidential breath testing device.
The device used for the test may be an evidential breath testing device, or EBT, or a non-evidential device. If the first test indicates an alcohol concentration of 0.02 or greater, the confirmation test must be done with an evidential breath testing device.
Please select a mouthpiece for your test. Note that they're individually wrapped and have never been used before. Before you blow into the mouthpiece, I want you to note that the device shows a reading of 0. When you blow into the mouthpiece, your reading will be displayed here. Any questions?
No, I guess not.
All right, I need you to take a deep breath, blow into the mouthpiece until I tell you to stop. Keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blow, going. Stop. Good.
Following the test, the bat must show you the result.
Okay, here is the result of your breath alcohol test. It is 0.01, which is below the threshold for a confirmation test, so we're almost done.
This driver tested below 0.02, so he's allowed to return to work. But if the test result had been 0.02 or greater, the driver would have required a confirmation test. The confirmation test is given at least 15 minutes, but no later than 30 minutes after the screening test. If the result is different, the confirmation test is considered the final result. If your confirmation test result is 0.02 or greater, but less than 0.04, your motor carrier must, at the very least, remove you from safety-sensitive functions for at least 24 hours. If your confirmation test result is 0.04 or greater, you will be removed from all safety-sensitive functions until you've completed the return to duty process, which we'll discuss later in this program. Testing for drugs is similar to alcohol testing. The sample collection must be done in a setting that offers you privacy and meets security requirements. The technician must be trained and certified in the process and must use approved materials and documents.
May I see your ID, please?
Like alcohol testing, you'll be required to present a photo ID.
Thank you. There you go. And if you would please empty your pockets and put everything in this drawer.
You'll also be required to empty your pockets to make certain that the sample you're about to give can't be tampered with.
Is that everything? Before you provide the urine sample, I need you to wash your hands here. Afterward, I'll turn off the water supply. You should fill the sample cup at least half full and don't flush the toilet when you're done. Do you have any questions?
Oh, what do I do with the sample after I'm finished?
I'll be waiting right out here. You can bring it to me. You can go ahead and wash your hands now.
You must provide at least 45 milliliters of urine for a split sample because 30 milliliters will be used for an initial test and 15 milliliters will be held if a confirmation test is needed. The technician will test the temperature of the sample. He or she will then divide the specimen into 2 containers for the split sample and seal both containers, a process you must observe as part of the test. The technician must place an identification label on the bottle. This label includes the date, individual specimen number, and any other required identifying information. You must then initial the identification label on the specimen bottle to certify the specimen collected was yours. Again, refusal to take the test or refusal to sign the form has the same consequences as testing positive.
Please sign here to confirm that you were present when the samples were sealed for shipment.
Once the certified lab has conducted the required testing, the results are forwarded to the medical review officer, the MRO. The MRO is a licensed physician who is responsible for receiving and reviewing all test results. If the test results are positive, adulterated, substituted, or invalid for any reason, the MRO will investigate the reasons for this result. The investigation will include contacting you to discuss the test results. During this conversation, the MRO will discuss any possible medical reasons for the test result. This is a confidential call that gives you a chance to discuss the test results with the MRO before your motor carrier is contacted. What can you do if you get this call? If you believe that the result is due to an error, you have 72 hours from the time of notification to request a test of the split sample by a different certified lab. This gives you the opportunity for an independent confirmation or rejection of the first result. If the second lab verifies that the initial test result is correct, the MRO will contact you again. Then the MRO has one more call to make to your motor carrier. Because it's so important that impaired drivers be kept off the road, the MRO will call a designated individual at your motor carrier and report the results. When a motor carrier is informed by the MRO that a driver has tested positive for drugs, the motor carrier will advise the driver regarding resources available to resolve the problem. This includes an evaluation by a substance abuse professional, or SAP. We'll say more about the role of the SAP in the next section. Everyone agrees that drinking, drugs, and driving don't mix. And when a driver misuses alcohol or uses drugs, the consequences are certain and swift. That driver is taken off the road. What happens next depends on the policies of the motor carrier. When your motor carrier learns from the MRO that you failed an alcohol test, tested positive for drugs, or refused to be tested, your motor carrier must provide you with a listing of qualified substance abuse professionals, SAPs. If a driver wants to return to safety-sensitive functions, including driving, he or she must meet face-to-face with the SAP, who will complete a clinical evaluation and may refer the driver to a treatment program. The SAP may consult with the MRO as part of this evaluation.
The SAP is responsible for conducting the initial evaluation and assessment, and so at the conclusion of that, we'll make some recommendations. Do you go to education or do you go to a treatment program? And we'll follow your case throughout your participation in that program. At the conclusion of that, we'll have you come back in our office. We'll sit down, we'll talk about what that experience was like for you, what you learned from it, and how you can prevent this occurrence from happening again. And then we'll submit a final report to your employer, which would include that you've completed the process, that you've done everything satisfactorily, and we'll also provide a final testing program as well.
After successful completion of any prescribed treatment or education program, the SAP will perform a follow-up evaluation to determine if the driver can return to duty. Part of this follow-up evaluation will include return to duty, alcohol and/or drug testing. The SAP will also determine how many follow-up tests will be required and how often they'll take place. After the driver has successfully completed the return to duty process, he or she may again perform safety-sensitive functions. All alcohol and drug testing records regarding individual drivers must be kept in a secure manner to prevent disclosure to unauthorized persons. This requirement applies to the SAP, the MRO, and your motor carrier. However, the regulations do permit your motor carrier to share this information when you give specific written authorization to your motor carrier. Examples of this include when you want a copy for your records, or when you want this information released to a prospective motor carrier. Beyond the dangers that alcohol abuse and drug use pose to those who share the highway, alcohol and drugs can have serious health effects on drivers who are users. Additionally, abusing alcohol or using drugs can have serious impacts on financial security and family stability. Drivers who misuse alcohol may exhibit slowed reactions, dulled mental processes, poor coordination, and bad judgment. Long-term alcohol abuse can lead to liver damage, stroke, heart attack, cancer, and brain damage. When it comes to drugs, there are a variety of physical signs and symptoms which can depend on the substance being used, including slowed reactions, slowed thinking, confusion, anxiety, hallucinations, changes in vision, and dizziness. For a complete listing of the possible short-term and long-term health effects of alcohol and controlled substances, consult the driver handbook issued to you during training. There is one effect that alcohol and all the prohibited drugs share in common: impaired driving ability. You know from experience that managing a large commercial motor vehicle on the highway and at the loading dock requires focused concentration, excellent vision, and rapid reflexes. And these are the first abilities to be impaired by alcohol and drugs. If you believe you have a problem, the regs offer a path to admit the problem, get help, and return to driving. Fortunately, the motor carrier industry has an outstanding overall record when it comes to complying with the rules regarding alcohol and drugs. The vast majority of professional drivers know, obey, and support the regulations. Because breaking the rules can have such tragic, devastating, and often fatal consequences, testing for alcohol abuse and drug use just makes good sense. Knowing the regulations and applying them in your daily work means you're doing your part to protect your industry, your motor carrier, your livelihood, and the driving public. Stay safe out there.